nomination, it's coming. And I think what you're gonna see is 2028 AOC. Because I don't think Newsom has the ear of these folks, whereas she does. It's a PSA world right now for the Democrats. I don't see anybody coming to get in the way of that. And anybody who doubts how dangerous they are, I would urge you, go online and just look at the DSA, the Democratic Socialist of America, look at their manifesto. Look what they want to do. No prisons, no police. And this is the kind of stuff that they're talking about. It's pure communism. It's very dangerous.
Jessica, if you are smuggling organs, I could use a new liver.
Oh, really?
It was quite the week.
Your twenties were wild, right? It's acceptable to do cocaine.
No, that is just a rumor.
Oh, it was literally said out loud in the gloss.
I did not spread that rumor. That is a
Okay.
piece of disinformation, Jessica, which we're used to coming from you.
Okay. Well, I think the only disinformation is that Rashida Tlaib is a leader of the Democratic Party. I know no real life Democrat who thinks that. It sounded like the rowdy group in that room with her were enthused about what she was laying down, to use your jargon. But the reality is that no Republican that represents a swing district can hold a town hall because everyone in their district is showing up to scream at them about
Hello, John.
Hi, Sue. How are you?
Fine, how are you?
Oh, we made it through another Labor Day.
That's true. When do you go back to your old other home?
Actually, probably in another 10 days.
Oh, okay, so it's imminent.
It's imminent. Yeah, we got rid of all of the crowds and kids, our son and all of his friends, and now we've got to get everything buttoned down for the winter, and that takes a few days.
Okay,
So anyway, that's kind of where we are. It's it's a ritual we've been going through for a number of years, so we've
you've got it down pat.
got it down. Well, pretty pat. There's always some things that change. Did you have a good holiday?
I did, thank you.
Good.
One of my daughter's friends invited me for brunch yesterday, and they're vegetarians,
Oh, okay.
and that was interesting.
Yeah. Well,
Lots of salads and fruit, and I guess we did have bagels.
yeah.
But none of the things that you typically think of as brunch sorts of things.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but when I think of some of the typical kinds of East Coast foods that I really like, and bagels and lox, uh, that's pretty special. And
Yep.
when we've
And
taken,
they have a special store called Iggy's where they like to go for bagels that are
Mhm.
very good. Excuse me.
What's the name of it?
Iggy's. Iggy's.
Iggy's. Oh,
Iggy's.
okay. Okay. Well,
Not Aggies, but Iggy's with an I.
Iggy. Yeah.
Well, here comes Harold.
Yeah.
If he will
He's probably having his dinner.
he's probably eating, yes.
So anyway, we had good weather. It's amazing. We had a few warm days, and when I say warm, I mean hot days. Then all of a sudden we had rain, and we had on and off rain and cool weather most of the holiday. Harold, how are you?
I'm all right.
Good. That's good to
We
hear.
figured
Uh,
we figured you were eating, and that's why
no, I was booting up and I'm also multitasking,
okay.
so we're
You
just
said
trying to figure it out.
you were going to be taking some trips, Harold, to the West Coast, was it?
Uh, Denver, maybe.
Uh-huh.
I got a job, Air Force Base where they installed some diesels that I need to look at some point.
Diesel generators?
Yeah.
Hello, Fred. Before we
Hey.
start, I have a question.
Sure.
I assume you are going to be observing the second night of the holiday and there will be no class that week?
Let's see, no, I really don't. So
Okay.
as far as I'm concerned, we're still on for that Tuesday night.
Oh, okay, good.
Okay,
I'm
Okay.
glad I asked.
I'm glad you did too, Sue.
What has happened to,
Chris and Rachel?
yeah,
They've
Yeah,
been,
I
well,
think
he started a new job.
Oh, he did?
yeah, and Rachel emailed me. She's taking some kind of new class where she'll be out the next few times. So we may be without them for a few more weeks.
oh, okay, well, we'll just have to inhale and get on with it.
Yeah,
Right. We still have our core.
yeah. Oh, Harold, do you know anything about the new job he started?
It's some sort of consulting job and it's remote.
Oh,
Oh,
So he's working from home. So that's all I know.
okay. Yeah,
I
I'll
don't
be
know
back
any-
in just a minute. I
sure.
gotta let the dog out.
Oh, that's important. Harold, so
Yeah,
you both are working for consultants.
I guess. So,
Well,
Harold, isn't it time to retire?
yeah, I'm thinking about retiring or going part-time. Uh, Next spring. But
Harold,
we'll,
with all of your expertise, can you kind of go out on your own with
you
all the
know,
connections over
I,
the
I,
years?
I I might be able to, but I don't know how busy I want to be.
Yeah. Well, if you're working for yourself, you can be as busy as you want to be.
Yeah, but from the few people I've met, they're busier than they need to be.
Yeah. Well, moving into retirement, I found when I was consulting, I was busier than I wanted to be, and it was a real struggle to try to pare things down, but I managed to do that. My,
I've got several projects that are 3 years out.
yeah,
So I'm thinking if that gives me part-time work,
yeah,
something to do a few hours every morning, something to get
sure,
out of bed,
yeah.
that would be enough for me.
Well, that's great. The most important thing I think everybody can tell you that's retired is to stay busy.
Yeah,
I've heard
absolutely.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially if you don't play golf.
Well, if you play golf, you still have to stay busy.
That's true.
You got to keep the things upstairs moving around and
Yeah, you do. You
being
do.
challenged.
I'd
That's
say otherwise your head turns to cottage cheese.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Sue.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started.
Sure.
Actually, there's a lot of stuff in this parsha. It's called Kitetse, and we're still in Deuteronomy. We're on chapter 21, and this one begins on verse 10.
Chapter 21, verse 10.
Mhm.
Got it.
Okay. And
Yep.
actually, this is sort of a grab bag of about 20 different things. There's just a jumble of different laws with a few verses for each. The first is 10 through 14, which is basically the treatment of a woman taken captive in war. So
Hmm.
someone wants to read
I'll
10 through
do it.
14.
I'll do it.
Okay.
When you, an Israelite warrior, take the field against your enemies and your God delivers them into your power, and you take some of them captive, and you see among the captives a beautiful woman. Boy, it's picky. And you desire her and would take her into your household as your wife. You shall bring her into your household, and she shall trim her hair, pare her nails, and discard her captive's garb. She shall spend a month's time in your household, laminating for her father and mother. After that, you may come to her and thus become her husband, and she shall be your wife. Then you shall no longer want her. You must release her. Then should you no longer want her, you must release her outright. You must not sell her for money, since you had your will of her. You must not enslave her.
Which actually, considering what things were done in the ancient world, is a fairly high standard. Typically, if you defeated an enemy, let's say you took a city, you killed all the men, and you took all the women and children as slaves. Well, we had that last week, actually. But here, what they're saying is, if you take this woman, you first of all, you have to give her a month to mourn, for what she's lost, her family that she's lost. And then if you want her, as a wife or concubine, that's fine. But if you decide you don't want her, you can't keep her as a slave or you can't sell her to someone else. You simply have to let her go free, which was really an unusual practice for the ancient world as far as captives in war were concerned. And then they go on to the next few verses. The son of a wife who isn't loved. And this is just basically just 15, 16, and 17. Somebody wants to read those.
I'll keep going on this
Okay.
marriage, this thing.
Okay.
If a household, sir, has two wives, one loved and the other unloved, and both the loved and the unloved have borne him sons, but the firstborn is the son of the unloved one. When he wills his property to his sons, he may not treat as firstborn the son of the loved one in disregard of the son of the unloved one who is older. Instead, he must accept the firstborn, the son of the unloved one, and allot him a double portion of all he possesses, since he is the first fruit of his vigor, the birthright in his due.
Uh, So basically, what they're saying, and this actually is fairly common because you're living in a society where polygamy is permitted and it's common. And this actually is a situation that would probably come up, with fair amount of frequency. The best example really is Jacob, who marries two sisters, Leah and Rachel. He never wanted to marry Leah. Laban tricked him into that. Rachel's the one he loved, but his firstborn is Reuben, Laban, who is Leah's son, and he has to acknowledge him as his firstborn. Whereas, although Jacob really doesn't hold to that, because his firstborn son by the loved wife, which is Rachel, is Joseph. And as the Bible narrative tells you, he really treats Joseph as if he were his firstborn. He lavishes all this attention on him. He makes it clear that Joseph is the one that he really loves more than his brothers, which is what gets Joseph in so much trouble, in the first place. But Jacob in a sense broke the rule. He refused to accept Reuben, the son of the unloved wife, rather than Joseph, the first son of the one he really loved. And then the next one is 18 through 21. And this was actually one of my favorite Bible verses when my kids were teenagers. Somebody want to read 18 through 21.
If a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and though they discipline him, will not listen to them, then his father and his mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of his city at the gate of the place where he lives. And they shall say to the elders of the city, this our son is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voices. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of the city shall stone him to death with stones. So you shall purge the evil from your midst, and all Israel shall hear and fear. Wow.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. But
Boy,
yeah, and
my firstborn wouldn't have made it to teenagerhood if I followed this
that's
one.
right. Yeah. Yeah. The rabbis, of the Talmud had a problem with this. 'Cause,
Wow.
and what they really did was they put so many legal procedural roadblocks in the way. For instance, they said it's obviously the language is all masculine, so it applies only to boys and not to girls. Secondly, until you're an adult, which is 13 for a boy, you're not responsible for your own acts, so it applies only to boys over 13. And then it mentions here he's a glutton and a drunkard. And so two witnesses have to testify that they've seen him, being a glutton and a drunkard. And I think the Talmud actually specifies it's like the equivalent of 3 Big Macs and a liter of wine all at one sitting. And they put so many legal roadblocks in this to make sure you would never actually get a conviction. But it doesn't hurt for the kids to know that it's on the books.
Yeah.
Mm.
Actually,
So
this is a
how
little bit,
would you measure gluttony? I
yeah.
mean, that wasn't, it wasn't a time period when it was possible to go to the corner store and get 3 Big Macs.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, but you could
Um,
eat more than your share at the dinner
right.
table.
Yeah. And a subsistence type economy, like most people had, most people were poor. Somebody who was a glutton would really put the rest of the family in peril. So,
Yeah.
but the interesting thing is, this actually is a little bit better than, in the Roman culture, a father had absolute life and death authority over everybody who lived under his roof. I mean, if he didn't like one of his kids, he could actually kill one of his kids. And that was none of the state's business. If he suspected his wife of adultery, he actually could execute her. And again, as the head of the family, that was his right. Over here, the parents are not allowed to execute their son. They've got to bring him before a court and have someone else make the determination. So it's really a step above, the usual practice in the ancient world.
How often was something like this used? You said that there were so many legal
Yeah.
restrictions.
Yeah, according to the Talmud, no child was ever executed under this
Okay.
law. So I still like the idea that it's there, though.
Yeah. Oh, it's a good thing to talk to your kids about.
Right.
Hopefully
Yeah,
keep
but
them in line.
Yeah. And then there's another just very brief law, which is just 22 or 23. Mother wants to read that.
I'll go ahead. And if a man has committed a crime punishable by death, and he is put to death, and you hang him on a tree, his body shall not remain all night on the tree, but you shall bury him the same day, for a hanged man is cursed by God. You shall not defile your land that the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance.
Yeah. And, and the later rabbis of the Talmudic period actually expanded on that. They said that no dead body should actually remain in any situation, who died by any reason, natural, disease, whatever. No dead body should remain overnight. And so the Orthodox custom, which is still done in Orthodox communities, is that burial always happens on the day of death. As soon as death occurs, there's a purification ceremony that should be done immediately afterward, and then the body is buried immediately. That in this country, that uh, kind of is hard to do because usually when somebody dies, you have a family scattered across the country. You got to wait a couple of days for everybody to fly in for the funeral. But actually, in Orthodox communities in Israel, it is done because Israel's small enough, anybody can get from almost anywhere to anywhere else. in a few hours. And
But
so,
what about the Sabbath or Shabbos?
uh,
What happens if it happens Friday afternoon or
they,
Saturday morning?
well, if it happens on Saturday, if you can't get it done before the Sabbath, then you have to wait till afterward. Yeah,
Hmm.
the Sabbath would take precedence. So if someone dies Friday, you try to get it done before Shabbat begins on Friday night. But if Sabbath has already begun, then you really have to wait till Saturday night, to do it.
So the last verse here, 23,
Hmm.
makes it sound like if the body's impaled, you can't bury it within Israel.
No, I wouldn't. I
You
wouldn't read
shall
it
not
that way.
defile the land that your God has given you to possess.
No, what they're saying is that the sight of his body hanging there is what defiles the land. You need to get it into the grave as quickly as you can.
Okay,
It's the sight of the hanging body that defiles the land.
I was reading it that when you bury it the same day for an impaled
Mhm.
body, you shall not defile the land by
No.
putting that body in the land. Okay,
Well, the body's already in the land, so you can't do anything about that. Um, okay,
run
then
it over to Egypt.
yeah, yeah, export it. Yeah, okay. Okay, then we're going over to chapter 22. And then from verses 1 through 4 and 22, you have another set of laws. Somebody want to read 1 through 4?
If you see your fellow's ox or sheep gone astray, do not ignore it. You must take it back to your fellow. If your fellow does not live near you, or you do not know who he is, you shall bring it home, and it shall remain with you until your fellow comes to claim it. Then you shall give it back to him. You shall do the same with his ass, you shall do the same with his garment, and so too shall you do with anything that your fellow loses, and you find. You must not remain indifferent. If your fellow's ass or ox fallen on the road, do not ignore it. You must help it to rise.
Yeah. So again, this is really a repeat. We already had this in Exodus. In fact, in Exodus, they worded it a little bit differently. Exodus says, if your enemy's animal is seen lying on the road, you have to help him lift it up. You have to do it not just for your neighbor, but for your enemy, anybody who needs help. The literal Hebrew you shall not hide yourself. In other words, you can't be totally selfish and not pay any attention to anyone else's needs. If you're there and the thing needs to be done, you have to help with it. Um,
When
yeah,
you
go ahead.
so if it's an injured animal or it's got a bad leg, you know,
Mhm.
stepped in a hole or something.
Yeah,
So you're obligated to take care of that animal
I mean, if you find the animal
until,
there and the owner's not there,
yeah, and the owner's not there until the owner
yeah,
claims
I
it.
think that's how it's interpreted.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I
but they
like
don't go into what happens if the owner never shows up. At what point you get to say, "I get to keep it. That's
Yeah.
mine."
Yeah. But the thing
Okay,
is, we got to render aid. You got to help the animal.
exactly. Yeah, you can't not help aid if you're in a position
Can't
to
walk
help.
by it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to remember this next line come February when we do the little short thing at the synagogue on the story of Esther. I'm tired of wearing a dress and a wig.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, he's referring to verse 5, which is, just a one verse thing. A woman shall not wear that which pertains to a man, neither shall a man put on a woman's garment. Whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord your God. The belief of most of the modern scholars is that was probably a practice of a lot of pagan cult. During various ceremonies, men would dress up as women or women as men. And so
Oh,
this all comes with the general heading of don't do like the idolaters around you are doing.
Like I
Um,
said, when I get that call next year, I'm gonna go
Quote that verse,
back to
yeah.
Deuteronomy.
Yeah. Mark that verse down so you can quote it when they call it.
Yep.
But I
Okay.
would imagine that this can create quite a problem in present day.
Uh, it probably would, yeah. Although frankly, for at least what we see in the movies and pictures and stuff of the ancient world, I don't think men's and women's clothes were as different then as they are now. I mean, men didn't wear pants or shirts or suits like we have now. They wore robes essentially, which is what women wore. There wasn't anything that much difference between a man's robe and a woman's dress in those days. In modern society, there's a clear difference, between a man's suit, and a woman's dress.
Hmm.
But obviously there was some difference, or they wouldn't have had this verse
Yeah.
in there. Okay, let's skip ahead just a little bit. There's a lot of stuff in here. Let's go to verse 13. And verse 13 through 21 uh, is really based on the importance of a bride being a virgin in biblical times. This is a law of what happens if a bride is not a virgin. So
And
that's verses
13 to what, Fred?
13 through 21.
Okay. A householder takes a woman as his wife and cohabitates with her. Then he takes an aversion to her and makes up charges against her and defames her, saying, "This is the party I took. But when I approached her, I found that she was not a virgin." In such a case, the girl's father and the mother shall produce the evidence of the girl's virginity before the elders of the town at the gate. And the girl's father shall say to the elders, "To this party I gave my daughter to wife, but she has taken an aversion to her." So he has made up charges, saying, "I did not find your daughter a virgin, but here is the evidence of my daughter's virginity." And they shall spread out the cloth before the elders of the town. The elders of the town shall then take that party and flog him, and they shall fine him 100 shekels of silver, and give it to the girl's father, for that householder has defamed a virgin in Israel. Moreover, she shall remain his wife. He shall never have the right to divorce her. But if the charge proves true, the girl was found not to have been a virgin, then the girl shall be brought out to the entrance of her father's house, and her town's council shall stone her to death, for she did a shameful thing in Israel, committing fornication while under her father's authority. Thus you will weep away evil from your midst. If a man is lying with another man's wife, both of
No,
them.
that's
Okay.
another section. Yeah, of course, the question here is how do you prove it that she was a
Yeah.
virgin? You get married, and let's say 3 months later, the guy decides, I don't think she was a virgin. I want to dump her. Well, what apparently was done in those days was the only evidence you could have of virginity would be the sheets from the bed on the wedding night, if there was blood on them. And so apparently, what would have to happen is the girl's parents would have to save those sheets, which was done in those days. So that would be the evidence. Of course, I've always wondered about that because you could cheat. I mean, you could take a sheet and put a little bit of goat's blood on it and say, this is the sheet from the wedding night. So it's really hard to imagine how this was actually done as a practical matter.
Well, it, I'm sure it's one of those things that it's a great theory, but in practice,
In
yeah,
practice, I
yeah,
can't see how it really worked out. Yeah. But then it goes on with a related subject with 22 through 29, which is basically what to do about rape. Um, Sue, you haven't read yet. Won't you do
Oh, I
22
did
through
read, but I
29?
will be happy to read. If a man
okay.
found lying with another man's wife, both of them, the man and the woman with whom he lay shall die. Thus you will sweep away evil from Israel. In the case of a virgin who is engaged to a man, if the man comes upon her in town and lies with her, you shall take the two of them to the gate of the town and stone them to death. The girl because she did not cry out for help in the town, and the man because he violated another man's wife. Thus you will sweep away evil from your midst. But if the man comes upon an engaged girl in open country, and the man lies with her by force, only the man who lay with her shall die. But you shall do nothing to the girl. The girl did not incur the death penalty, for this case is like that of a man attacking another and murdering him. He came upon her in the open. Though the engaged girl cried for help, there was no one to save her. If a man comes upon a virgin who is not engaged, and he seizes her and lies with her, and they are discovered, the man who lay with her shall pay the girl's father 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife because he violated her. He can never have the right to divorce her.
Now, the adultery thing, again, the real problem with that is that, there was no forensic evidence in those days. So the only way you could be convicted of adultery is by two witnesses actually catching you in the act. And you can imagine how often something like that would happen. So even though, this sounds like pretty harsh, both of them get stoned to death, you really wonder how often would it ever be that a couple actually would be caught having sex by two witnesses. So you really wonder if this was ever carried out. Then the betrothed virgin who's in the city, basically she's considered guilty because she's in the city, and theoretically, if she had screamed or cried out, there would have been people there to help her. Whereas outside in the field where there's no one around, then she's not guilty because she had no one there to help her. It wouldn't have helped to cry out. It's interesting though with the man who rapes the virgin who is not betrothed, not engaged to anyone, he's forced to marry her. And the idea is, and sort of the basic principle is, you break it, you own it. I mean, since she's not a virgin anymore, in this society, who else is going to
Yeah,
marry her? So
yeah,
he is forced to marry her, and he has to support her for the rest of her life. She can
yeah.
take him to court if he doesn't, supply adequate support. So this is really the reason for that. Okay. And then with chapter 23, um, there's a whole new set of rules about marriage and inheritance. And this is verses 1 through 9 on chapter 23.
Okay. No one whose testicles are crushed or whose male organ is cut off shall enter the assembly of the Lord. No one born of a forbidden union may enter the assembly of the Lord. Even to the 10th generation, none of his descendants may enter the assembly of the Lord. No Ammonite or Moabite may enter the assembly of the Lord. Even to the 10th generation, none of them may enter the assembly of the Lord forever. Because they did not meet you with bread and with water on the way when you came out of Egypt, and because they hired against you Balaam the son of Bor from Pethor of Mesopotamia to curse you, but the Lord your God would not listen to Balaam. Instead, the Lord your God turned the curse into a blessing for you, because the Lord your God loved you. You shall not seek their peace or their prosperity all the days forever. You shall not abhor an Edomite, for he is your brother. You shall not abhor an Egyptian, because you were a sojourner in his land. Children born of them in the 3rd generation may enter the assembly of the Lord.
Yeah. So basically, what he's saying, starting off with the first part, somebody who has his testicles crushed may not enter. What he's talking about is a eunuch. And actually, there were a lot of eunuchs in those days. because they were very popular. In fact, the Hebrew word for eunuch, sarifs, also means court officer. A
Right.
lot of kings would have eunuchs in their courts. Number one, you could trust them around your harem. Number two, since they didn't have a family, they'd be less inclined to steal or try to manipulate things to enrich their own family. Um,
Well,
and yeah,
so Safaria has a line above this.
yeah. Some Bibles have it a little bit different.
Yeah,
What
it says, no householder shall take his father's former wife as his own wife, so as to remove his father's garment.
Yeah, it's a prohibition about marrying your father's former wife. If you're his son, you can't marry your mother, basically, if your father divorces her. It's one of these forbidden unions. Some Bibles just have the verses, the numbers of the verses different. Um, but the business with the eunuchs, and it wasn't just in the ancient world. In Europe, in the 18th and 19th centuries, you had boys who had really beautiful soprano voices, and what their parents would do is castrate them before puberty, to maintain those voices. They were called castratos, and there are parts in operas of the period that were written to be sung by castratos. You could have a very lucrative career, as a castrato, and parents actually made their kids eunuchs, for that purpose. And you could see parents in the ancient world, if it would get your kid a high position in court, maybe it's worth doing. So this is why this verse is in there, to try to prohibit that. Um, and then the next verse, children of prohibited unions. The Hebrew term here is mamzer, which is usually translated as bastard, but we consider a bastard to be someone whose parents aren't married. That's not the biblical definition. A forbidden union would be an adulterous union. So a product of adultery would be called a bastard. And again, he would be prohibited. Um, the Moabites and Ammonites, there's another reason supposedly why they can't come into the covenant. You remember the story when God destroys Sodom and Gomorrah, and Lot flees the city, and his wife turns around, gets zapped into a pillar of salt, and Lot and his two daughters are left living in this cave, and his daughters decide that they must be the last human beings left in the world, so the world will end if they don't have kids. So they get their father drunk on subsequent nights and have sex with him. And it's believed that the Moabites and Ammonites are descended from those two adulterous unions. In fact, the Bible
Oh,
says that in Genesis.
yeah.
And so that's the other reason why they're cursed people. Because that's what makes the book of Ruth so dramatic. Here is Ruth, who's an Edomite woman, who, because of her personal qualities, the loving kindness she shows Naomi, is actually taken into the congregation and is allowed to become not only part of the Jewish people, but the great grandmother of King David.
Hmm.
So the law was suspended in her case. The other thing which I could never figure out, that an Edomite or an Egyptian is okay. Well, an Edomite you could see, because Edom is Esau's country. And Esau, Jacob had this kind of frenemy thing. It's a love-hate relationship, between the two brothers. But I've never understood the Egyptians. I mean, all they did was enslave us for 400 years and tried to kill all our firstborn, but they're okay.
Yeah.
I never understood why the Egyptians were okay in this thing. The, let's move ahead just a little bit to verse 20.
20.
Yeah. Here verses are 20 and 21. Somebody wants to read just those two verses, 20 and 21, which are,
Okay. You shall not deduct interest from loans to your fellow Israelites, whether in money or food or anything else that can be deducted as interest. But you may deduct interest from loans to foreigners. Do not deduct interest from loans to your fellow Israelites, so that your God may bless you in all your undertaking in the land that you are about to enter and possess.
uh, and basically, this was a rule of no interest loans. And actually, in the Middle Ages, the church also didn't like the idea of lending at interest, but obviously somebody had to lend money or you couldn't have a commercial society. So they thought and the ideal thing is let the Jews do it. So the Jews were often allowed into being money lenders, even though they were kept out of a lot of other professions and jobs. And of course, it worked for the Jews because again, they're not allowed to lend at interest to other Jews, but they are allowed to lend to non-Jews. So it kind of worked out okay for both sides. And then it goes out. The next one is 22 through 24. Someone wants to read that. These are laws concerning oaths.
But if you refrain from vowing, you will not be guilty of sin. You shall be careful to do what has passed your lips, for you shall voluntarily vow to the Lord your God what you have promised with your mouth. If you go into your neighbor's vineyard, you may eat your fill of grapes, as many as you wish, but you shall not put any in your bag. If you go into your neighbor's standing grain, you may pick the ears with your hand, but you shall not put a sickle to your neighbor's standing grain.
First part, of course, is vows. And again, it emphasizes that if you make a vow, you have to keep it, even if
Yeah.
it turns out badly. And of course, the example that the rabbis always quote is the Book of Judges, where Jephthah, one of the judges, is about to go out to battle, and he promises God that if he gives him victory, he'll sacrifice the first thing that comes to greet him when he comes back home. And of course, when he approaches his house, his daughter runs out, to greet him, and he's forced to sacrifice his daughter. And the rabbis use that as an example of basically don't make vows. You never know how circumstances change. You never know something may come up which may make it almost impossible to keep it. And so the best thing is just to avoid vows altogether, unless it's absolutely necessary. In fact, actually, Paul sort of has the same kind of idea. One of his letters in the New Testament, I can't remember exactly which letter it is. Paul says, "Let your yea be yea and your nay be nay, for more than that, get you in trouble." In other words, your word should be enough. You should not have to take oaths if you're an honest guy. Okay. Then
So,
there's another interesting part here. If you
Brad,
look at verse, yeah.
I guess I'm not understanding what a vow and a promise to do something. If I promise to go
Mhm.
help my neighbor dig post holes or something like that, that's not
Mhm.
considered a vow. That's just you've agreed
It's a
to do
promise, yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Okay.
A vow is a vow taken to God. You're
Oh,
telling God,
okay.
yeah, it's basically saying if you will do this, then I will do that. If you'll give me victory in this battle, I will sacrifice, the first thing that comes to greet me. It's
Oh,
that
okay.
kind of thing.
Okay.
Yes,
So
it's not
it's
an ordinary promise, to your neighbor. I'll come out and help you pick your harvest tomorrow.
okay. That
That
because
that
I
wouldn't
got
be
in that.
considered an
Okay.
oath.
So this
No.
is saying you can't actually, it's about negotiating with God.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you cut a deal with God, there's no way out. And so you're better off not getting there's you're better off not getting into that
Okay.
situation in the
Yeah.
first place.
Gotcha.
You can't change your mind.
Yeah. The other thing which you read at the end there is I think it's kind of nice. If you walk through your neighbor's vineyard and you're hungry, you can pluck some grapes and eat them as you go. But you're not allowed to bring a sack with you and
Yeah.
take all that you can.
Yeah.
The same with if you're walking through a cornfield. If you want to pick an ear of corn and eat it while you're walking through, fine. But again, you can't loot your neighbor's farm just because you're hungry.
But it's
Um,
common down where we live, Fred, when they've harvested, the first harvest of whether it's melons or it's onions or that type of thing, is they leave the field to for people to come glean. In other words, once they've made the first run through the field, it's open for anybody who wants to come in and pick up what remains.
really,
Well,
that's
there's a
interesting.
verse somewhere, since I'm so not illiterate, there's a verse somewhere that says, "Don't cut, don't clean around the edges and leave it."
Yeah, that when, in fact, it's part of, we're going to be reading that actually part of this parsha. What it says is, if you're harvesting your field, you can only go over it once. Anything that you leave behind you, you can't go back up and pick it up. You have to leave it for the poor to glean. And then the other commandment is you have to leave, you can't harvest the corners at all. That's also for the poor to take.
Yeah.
Of course, it doesn't tell you how big a corner is. How much, how much you have to leave in the corner.
They must have foresaw the way mechanized harvesting is in the corner of a plot of
It
land.
could be, yeah.
You
But
got that
basically,
turning radius of the tractor.
yeah.
Or
But
the
basically,
ox.
like you see in Ruth, Boaz allows Ruth to follow his harvesters and glean everything they leave behind. The gleaners would basically walk behind the harvesters. If you're harvesting with a sickle, obviously you're not going to get 100% of the grain. There'll be some stuff left behind. So the gleaners follow right behind the harvesters and simply pick up whatever they miss. Let's see. Yeah, there's an interesting law here. If you look at chapter 24, which is the next chapter, and it's only one verse. Um, it says, "When a man takes a new wife, he shall not go out in the host, neither shall he be charged with any business. He shall be free for his house 1 year, and shall cheer his wife who is taken." So anybody who gets married has 1 year of draft deferment. You remember last week we read a bunch of rules about that. If a guy has just built a house and hasn't dedicated it yet, he doesn't have to go to war till the house is dedicated. If a man is planting a vineyard, and it hasn't grown yet, he hasn't had his first harvest, he's exempt from the war. If a man is engaged but hasn't married the woman yet, he's exempt again. So this again would belong with that previous set of laws, and they really were pretty liberal as far as draft exemptions.
Mhm.
Okay, let's see. Um, let's see the next part. Let me see. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here. Um, the next part is verses. Let me see. If you look at chapter 24, verse 10, and these are verses 10 through 15. Someone wants to read those. 10 through 15 on chapter 24.
When you make a loan of any sort of your compatriot, you must not enter the house to seize the pledge. You must remain outside while the party to whom you made the loan brings the pledge out to you. If that party is needy, you shall not go to sleep in that pledge. Shall not go to sleep in that pledge. You must return the pledge at sundown, that its owner may sleep in the cloth and bless you, and it will be to your merit before God. You shall not abuse a needy and destitute laborer, whether a fellow Israelite or a stranger in one of the communities of your land. You must pay out the wages due on the same day before the sun sets, for the worker is needy and urgently depends on it. Else a cry to God will be issued against you, and you will incur guilt.
Yeah. So basically what he's saying in the first part, with poor people taking a loan, often the only pledge they would have, the only security they could offer might be their outer garment, their cloak or coat. And that may be the only outer garment they have. They're very poor. So basically, if you take that coat as a security for the loan, you have to come back every evening and give it back to him because he may need that as a blanket at night. And of course, in practice, the way it works out, obviously, you're not going to come back to his house every evening to return the thing and come back to get it in the morning. So most creditors would probably just leave it, let the guy keep the coat and not demand the security. The other is again that you can't oppress a hired servant. You have to pay him every day his wages. You can't withhold his wages because he's living in a sense paycheck to paycheck. He may need that money every day just to get food for the next day. And 24:16 is interesting. The father shall not be put to death for the children, neither shall the children be put to death for the fathers. Every man shall be put to death for his own sin. That sounds reasonable. But if you turn back to the Ten Commandments, if you turn back to the book of Exodus, chapter 20, verses 4 and 5, look it up here. Let me see, chapter 20. Okay. This is the see, four. Yeah. Yeah, is part of the Ten Commandments. You shall not make unto thee a graven image or any manner of likeness of anything that is in the heaven above, or in the earth below, or in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down unto them nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, unto the third and fourth generations that hate me. So you have this part of the Ten Commandments saying that God will punish the children of these idolaters to the third or fourth generation. But here, this appears to contradict it. Saying, the fathers are responsible for their own sins, the sons are responsible for their own sins. And the rabbis really have a whole variety of different commentaries trying to reconcile these two. One explanation that's commonly given is that the father lives an evil life. It will influence. It's not that the son will be punished for his sins, but if he's a bad father and sets a bad example, there's more of a chance that his children will be bad people. And in that sense, the sins of the fathers will be visited on the children. Not that God will punish the children for the father's actual sins. Let's see.
So
And then,
if the child stole something from another family,
mhm.
and he was under 13 years old, that how would that be handled?
Well, supposedly the child is not responsible for his actions then, but
Yeah.
obviously the parents would have to make it good.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
then it falls on the parents. And again, it's a major legal issue today. We have for anybody under 18, we treat them differently, with
That's right.
juvenile crime. And there are a lot of states, we're really debating to what extent should parents be held responsible, if a child who's too young to be tried as an adult commits some really serious crime, to what extent can you hold the parents responsible? Can they be punished? Can they be
Yeah,
fined or even
well,
imprisoned?
there's recent precedent for that in
Yeah.
a couple of these within the last year and a half of these gun cases where
Hmm.
the parents, knew the kid had a gun or had access to the gun, and the kid went and killed people. They've come back and found guilty the parent.
Hmm. Yeah, and actually, I think there was one case where the parents were found guilty. You
Yes.
know, where they were warned, by the school that their son was having emotional problems, and they let him have access to a gun. So,
Hmm.
there is some precedent for that actually. Okay, then starting with Yeah, starting with verse 19, we were talking about the poor having part of the harvest. Somebody want to read 19 through 22?
When you
Go for it, John. Oh,
Oh, I
Sue.
haven't read. I'll read. When you reap the harvest in your field and overlook a shaft in the field, do not turn back to get it. It shall go to the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, in order that the Lord your God may bless you in all your undertakings. When you beat down the fruit of your olive trees, do not go over them again. That shall go to the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. And when you gather the grapes of your vineyards, do not pick it over again, for they shall go to the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. Always remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore, I do enjoin you to observe this commandment.
Yeah. That last part, remember that you were a servant or a stranger of the land of Israel. That actually is by far the most frequently repeated commandment in the Torah. It's actually 17 times that's stated between Exodus and Deuteronomy. And no other commandment comes anywhere near that in the frequency of repetition. In other words, you always have to look at the world from the side of the underdog. And, the prophets Isaiah, Jeremiah, Amos all pick up on that. The society is going to be judged on how it treats the widow, the orphan, and the stranger. That's the criteria for whether you have a good society or not.
Fred, was that a marked departure from the other societies that existed at the time, including the Egyptians, but all of the various groups that were around Israel at the time?
Yeah, most of them really was taking care of the poor is voluntary. If you happen to feel like it, you could take care of the poor. But the Jews were really the only ones in the ancient world who actually made it a matter of law. I mean, there were charitable, people in every culture, but in other cultures, if it makes you feel good to help somebody, by all means help them. But you're not legally required to do it. The Jews were the only people, and this was a matter of rabbinic law. In fact, there really is no Hebrew word for charity. There's no word really that corresponds to the English word charity. What's used is a Hebrew word tzedakah. And tzedakah comes from the Hebrew word tzedek, which means righteous. It's used in a moral sense of a righteous man, but in the Greco-Roman period, it became a legal term. The tzaddik or the tzedek was the man who the court found in favor of, the man who the law found to be in the right. The Rasha, which means the evil person, was not necessarily an evil person. It was just a person who the court found against. The law went against in this case. And so the implication is that giving to the poor is not a matter of sentiment, of empathy or sympathy. I mean, that's fine. I can go with it. But
Mhm.
whether you want to or not, you owe it to the poor. It's a basic legal obligation. God demands it of you. In fact, they really invented the idea of entitlement. The idea of certain things being the entitlement of the poor, well, like Social Security or Medicare. We really that started with the Jews. With the rabbis of the Greco-Roman period, that it's a society has got to take care of its needy members. You can't leave it to private charity, to people of good feeling. That might take care of it, it might not. But again, if you take charity from someone, no matter how nicely they decide to do it, you really can't take charity without losing some of your dignity. And no matter how well intentioned the person who's giving the charity, it still works on the dignity of the person getting it. Whereas if you make it an entitlement, then it's something that everybody gets, everybody's entitled to. If you tell somebody who's getting a Social Security that they're getting a welfare check every month, they'll get angry, usually. You paid into it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you live to 99, and collected for 30 something years, more than you ever paid into it. And you get it whether you're poor or not poor. And so poor people can receive Social Security without any kind of loss of dignity at all, because everybody gets it. It's a societal thing. And this really begins with the rabbinic concept of tzedakah, back in the Greco-Roman period. Okay. Let's see. There are a couple of other things that we can cover. One is interesting. If you go to chapter 25, um, and chapter 25, somebody want to read 1 through 3, just those first 3 verses of chapter 25.
Got it. When there is a dispute between two parties and they go to law, and a decision is rendered declaring the one in the right and the other is in the wrong, if the guilty one is to be flogged, the magistrate shall have the person lie down and shall supervise the giving of lashes by count as warranted by the offense. The guilty one may be given up to 40 lashes, but not more, lest being flogged further to excess, your peer be degraded before your eyes.
Yeah. So again, whipping was one of the possible penalties a court could impose. Notice the magic number 40 pops up again. That's the Bible's favorite number. In fact, but they say not to go further. The idea is if you take the punishment too far, you destroy the dignity of the guy who's being punished. You should not push punishment to the point where it degrades the person. In fact, there's a discussion of this in the Talmud, and the rabbis limited it to 39. And they say you have to limit it to 39 because what if you make a mistake in the counting? And so just to be on the safe side, you only make it 39 to begin with. So just in case you counted the 17th lash twice, you still wouldn't go over 40. That's kind of a safety factor built in. Then the last thing is probably worth looking at is the very end of the chapter, which is verses 17, verses 17 through 19. Somebody wants to read that.
Remember what Amalek did to you on your journey after you left Egypt. How undeterred by fear of God, he surprised you on the march when you were famished and weary and cut down all the stragglers in your rear. Therefore, when the Lord God grants you safety from all your enemies around you, in the land that the Lord your God is giving you as your hereditary portion, you shall blot out the memory of the Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget.
Yeah, and Amalek was the traditional enemy of the Jewish people. According to the rabbis, they interpreted these verses when the Hebrews were going through the Sinai desert. The Amalekites would not meet them in direct battle, but what they would do is lay an ambush and pick off the stragglers, the old and the weak, and the ones who weren't keeping up. Those are the ones that the Amalekites would prey on. And so the basic thing is that the Amalekites were to be the enemies of Jews forever. And you see it, remember, in the book of Samuel, where Saul is fighting the Amalekites, and God says, you have to kill every one of them. You have to totally wipe out Amalek. And Saul lets Agag, the king of the Amalekites, live. And the prophet Samuel says, because you've disobeyed God's commandment, the kingdom will be taken away from you and given, to someone else, to David. And of course, that goes on further in history. Agag, remember in the book of Esther, Haman the Agagite, tries to kill the Jews. Supposedly, Haman is a descendant of Agag, so the Amalekites. And enemies of the Jew, very often, Amalekite was used as a code word for the enemies of the Jews. Amalek could be used for Rome during the Roman period. It was used for the Nazis in writings during the Second World War. It was used for the church during the medieval period. Amalek was kind of a code word the rabbis were to use for any of the enemies of Israel. In a sense, they were symbolic of that. The last verse is kind of interesting. You shall blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. You shall not forget. I remember once Rabbi Marco was discussing these verses, he raised the question, it's telling you here to remember to forget. Okay? Always remember to blot out the memory of Amalek. So you're being commanded to remember to forget. Although I think there used to be a country song with that title. I forgot to remember to forget. I think it was a Conway Twitty song, if I remember it right.
Well, your
Very
memory's
cool.
much better than mine, Fred. Well,
So,
Is that it
okay.
for tonight?
Yeah, that's for tonight. I'll see you guys next week.
next week.
Hope,
Thank
yeah,
you
Thank
hope,
all.
Yeah,
Thank
hopefully
you,
maybe,
Fred.
Rachel and
Thanks,
Chris will
Fred.
be back. Okay, guys.